Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we?
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. So happy to have each and every one of you back here today. We've got a wonderful guest today. Some of you may recognize his name right off the bat. He's been in this industry for an awful long time and has touched a lot of travelers, a lot of people in his business. And so happy to have Simon Grove. Simon is the owner of Simon Grove Travel. We're going to discuss some of the other things that he's done that you might make the connections with. But Simon, so happy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Jason. I'm delighted to be on the show. I'm delighted to be on the podcast.
Well, it's really nice to have you on here. Last time we spoke was quite a while ago. And immediately it was like, man, I got to get this guy on the show. So I appreciate your patience with my persistence and getting back and connecting. I know you've had a lot of things happening here the last few months that we may even touch on. Simon, tell us, where are you calling from? I mean, we're doing a video call, but where are you right now?
I'm in South England. I'm not too far off Heathrow Airport. So I live in the southeast of England, not just west of London, in a place called Camberley.
Okay, Camberley. And so the very next question maybe is going to answer the question that I just had popped into my head. But I guess what I really want to know, Simon, is I want to know what you're doing, but I really want to know kind of how you got from where you were to where you are now. I don't know if that goes all the way back to Camberley. I don't know if you're born and raised there, but how far back in history should we go to kind of get a feel for who you are as a person and what shaped your life into doing this kind of work?
I think we probably go back to the mid-90s when I'd never heard of Camberley. I'm originally from the northeast of England, so any English listeners today will notice I've got a slightly different accent. They'll think he's not from Camberley. I'm from the northeast of England, from a little town in County Durham, and sort of grew up, went to university, wasn't then sure what I wanted to do. And actually, the village I was from, nobody travelled. It's a very sort of working class traditional village, and at the time, nobody travelled. And I decided I wanted to travel, and I actually went to sort of just a travel show of an overland truck. Came to a place near me. I went to see it, looked at it, saw the show, and thought I've got to do that. And so I ended up taking a bit of a plunge and doing a journey. I went from London to Kathmandu via Nairobi in an overland truck. I basically signed up for an expedition with Encounter Overland and was away it was about a 6-month expedition, which started off in London, went down the west coast of Africa, through Central Africa and up East Africa, across the Middle East and through Asia, which, I mean, it was an amazing trip. And as a culmination of that trip, I ended in Kathmandu, then travelled on to Thailand, China, took the Trans-Siberian back from Beijing, basically back to home, and came back and thought, yeah, I want to work in travel. Thought I've got to work in travel and beyond that. And so I was looking around, saw a few jobs for a tour leader, and I thought that's what I really want to do. I want to lead trips. Had a couple of interviews and ended up working for Explore Worldwide, and that was sort of probably 1996. And this probably quite naive boy from the northeast of England set out on a journey which has been incredible. Tour leading, starting for tour leading, probably the best job I've ever done, the hardest job I've ever done, the most rewarding job I've ever done, and a job that's really set me up for life. I've always pleased. And I actually, this is a true story, and it's also happened to somebody else I know, but how I got to Explore Worldwide, I was traveling on a train, and as someone had left a newspaper on the train, and I started to read the paper, and I saw an advert for Explore Worldwide wanting tour leaders in that newspaper, so I ripped it out and called it when I got home. So that's how I got into my traveling career.
Wow, so many questions. Probably the first one is what I heard you say is I went to a travel show,
yeah,
and there was an overland truck, And I'm envisioning like there's a truck parked there ready to go. Like, let's get on. I want to learn more about the overland truck. I've heard about it a bit, but what you just described to me, I think a lot of our listeners and myself included really would like to kind of understand that more. And I'm not sure even where to start with the questions.
Well, it was
Explain an overland truck.
Yeah, an overland truck at the time, it was an old sort of an ex-British Army truck, a Bedford truck that was painted bright orange, and it sort of turned up in a small exhibition centre in a place called Newcastle, and they just, there was adverts which went out, it was advertised, interested in travel, want to change your life, we've got one of our trucks in Newcastle on X day, come along and see it. And so I went along to the sort of exhibition. When I say exhibition, it was one company that had a truck sort of parked in a hall. Went to see it, looked at the truck. It was, the ex-British Army truck that had been modified to carry camping equipment. It had a trailer where you could put things in. It was probably very simple, the modifications. It was, and there was room for 18 people sort of sat in the back facing each other. So it was basically a row of seats. When I say a row of seats, it looks like a bench that went down either side of the back, faced each other. And that became so I saw it, thought, one, I want to do that. Took a bit of time to save up for the expedition, and then, booked the date. I think it was about probably 9 months from seeing it to actually leave and depart. I think I left early February 95 from London. On a very similar truck to what I'd seen.
That's very, very cool. I'm happy I asked for clarification because what I was imagining was not quite what you just described.
Mm.
So it could accommodate 18 people. Is that 18 guests, or does that include some of the guides and staff, or what does that look like?
So it had one driver. There was one driver on the trip who, did an absolutely remarkable job. And his job was the leader, but he looked after the money. He distributed. There was obviously, we'd all made, as part of the payments, there was contribution. Your food was included, so he would allocate the money, look after the money. He'd do the driving, he'd do the mechanical repairs. He'd probably deal with any issues that came up, and there was many issues crossing borders sort of within Africa. He did it. It's sort of, you look back now and think it's unbelievable that there was one driver on that trip who did all of that. When he got sick, he was sick.
How long were you guys together?
Well,
6 months, right?
Initially we were together. So that driver took us from London down to Nairobi. So that was around about probably the 3 to 4 month mark. And then it was another sort of probably another 3 months to get. We had another driver that took us to Kathmandu. But yeah, when we got to Nairobi, the original driver, I think it was absolutely shattered. But as part of the trip, what happened on the trip? So you had the driver, the leader, but as a group of 18 and there's people on that group from some Switzerland, Holland, the United Kingdom, Canada, the USA, Australia. People have come from all over sort of the world on it. And the first night you have a meeting, you allocate jobs. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that for the first few weeks? So one person's job was to load the baggage on. Every night you'd pack it, or every morning you'd pack the baggage. They would unload it on a night. Another person's job, they were in charge of the fire. That was a job I really wanted and I didn't get initially, setting the fire every day. And then I think I got allocated probably quite a topical job now with sustainability. I was waste management. So it was my job to get rid of the rubbish every day, which a couple of us had. So everyone had jobs, and you would cook as a team. You were in pairs. Every 9 days you would be cooking for that day for everybody, which some people were good cooks, some people weren't so good cooks, and you realise there's a lot of morale around food with travel. So there was some days we didn't look forward to, but it was good. It was sort of, it was a genuinely life changing experience where we made a lot of friends. You can imagine living in such close quarters over sort of an elongated time. It was brilliant. It was brilliant.
It kind of sounds like, not quite, but kind of sounds like a bunch of people. I was going to say guys, a bunch of guys getting together and renting an apartment. So they all kind of pitch in on the rent, but then obviously things need to happen around the house. And I can imagine a lot of opportunity for conflict. But you guys are like actually moving and dealing with changing environments, changing things every day for a long time. Wow.
And it was all camping as well. So it was camping throughout. I'm trying to, occasionally there'd be a chance to sort of check into sort of a room on a campsite, but it was camping throughout. And it was tough, the conditions, sort of setting up tent every night. Perhaps in Central Africa, it's wet. You're setting up tent, you're having food, you've got to cook that. And it was tough, but it was great fun. And actually, you say about conflict, and I'm trying to think. I think that there's probably every now and then there'd be a small irritant, but considering we're all people who didn't know each other, there was very little conflict. There was no big arguments. There was nothing which sort of sits in my mind as, oh yeah, that was awful. We all fell out for months and weeks. It was, perhaps one day somebody would do something that'd be slightly irritating, and it was over. It was really good.
In a lot of the tourism industry now, we talk a lot about different types of travelers. We've got backpackers. And what I'm hearing is would you, knowing what you know, would you classify the type of people that would go on a trip like this kind of like backpackers? Is there a significant difference between a backpacker and somebody that would go on a trip like this?
I think, there are overland companies that do it now, and I definitely class them as backpackers. I think in when I did it in the mid-90s, I think it was travel was a lot harder then. It was harder to get to places. It was more difficult. So I think it was a variety. Everybody lived out of a backpack, but I think it was for the curious, really. It gave a chance to go to countries you could never, ever go to, sort of yourself. I think, I used the word expedition before. And at the time, I didn't think of it as an expedition at all. It was sort of like a holiday. It was a truck holiday. It was a truck trip. Now I look back and think, yeah, that was really, that was a bit of an expedition. I think it was, probably not quite backpacking. I think it was a bit tougher than backpacking. And the other thing about it was really about the journey. You didn't spend a lot of time in places. It was about, the driver had a schedule. You had to be in Nairobi on a certain day, and some of the road conditions, especially in Central Africa, were appalling. The truck would have difficulties. He'd have to fix something, and you've continually got to make up, get that time. So it wasn't a trip where, a backpacker might spend a week in a place and get there and think, I love this. It was, right, we're here, sometimes 2 nights in a place, and otherwise we go, and it's constantly on the go.
Okay. All right. That's pretty fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. As somebody that, I don't know if that's a more common thing in Europe, why I suspect it is. I know there's long routes that you can take here in the Americas, but I've honestly never even heard of an expedition truck.
I think that it was very, very popular in the sort of the 80s and 90s. It was, the truck trips. It was, they used to call from the UK, the hippie trail. It was London to Kathmandu was a traditional one where there'd be trucks that go sort of, drive along. And this one just had a little bit of a diversion, but, they were quite popular. It was a really good value way to get through a destination as well. It was a cost effective way to go and see the world, but it was a cost-effective way to go and see parts of the world that you would never get the chance to see. And I think nowadays, the overland trucks, I know they still exist. They tend, to go through South Africa, Central Asia seems to be a really popular spot for them at the moment. Going across the 5 stands, but they're still there. And I think the trucks are a bit more luxurious than they were in those days. But for anybody thinking of it, I would really recommend it. It's good fun.
No, it sounds fascinating. I've heard of the cross Africa stuff, and I guess it's the same thing, but your journey was quite a long one. That's very cool. I'm happy we discussed that. And I'm curious, I want to go back to right before that, because it sounds like what you were doing, refresh my memory just a little bit, like you were going to school, you finished school, and then you went and did this?
I went to school and I went to university. So I did a degree at university.
What were you studying?
I studied combined studies, which was a bizarre combination of law and biology. It was Leicester Polytechnic then. It was in the UK, we call it. So I did a 3-year degree course. I think one of the probably issues I had when I was younger, I could never decide what I wanted to do. I know that kids often don't know what they want to do, and kids often but I've got 2 kids, 14 and 11 now. They don't know what they want to do apart from be footballers. That will change. But I think as my peer group got older, they all decided what they wanted to do at some point, and people went in direction. And I just couldn't decide. And I sort of, I think the epiphany moment for me was doing that journey, which came after sort of 3 years at university, then a couple of years working, doing some quite sort of menial, basic jobs. Just thinking, I just don't know what I want to do, and I knew I wanted to travel. That's the other thing. I knew I wanted to travel, and a lot of my, you know, a lot of my travel, I travelled around the UK an awful lot, and I travelled around Europe an awful lot. At the time, football's a big sport in England, and I had a local football team that I used to support. So I used to travel all over the country watching them. So I really got there. And people sometimes say, really watching football, but I really got the travel bug from going to, on a supporters coach from the northeast, traveling. I mean, went to all over the country watching football, and then I then went to Europe to watch it. So it was, in many ways, football got me into travel as well.
That's interesting. I've noticed in just having so many conversations here on the podcast, it seems like a common thread. A lot of the folks that I speak with that are now doing this type of work kind of went through a similar thing. They just really couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. They maybe started out doing whatever mom and dad or somebody else suggested they do, and it just wasn't doing it for them. And then, wow, all of a sudden this world just opens up in front of them. And it's interesting because I think if I were to interview a bunch of, financial analysts or lawyers or people like that, I don't think very many of them would say, well, when I was younger, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I finally, I found law, and oh my gosh, it was amazing or whatever. I think they kind of had their head straight a little bit sooner. I shouldn't say it that way. It was maybe a little easier for them to find their path because society doesn't do a great job of offering adventure tourism type of stuff as a legitimate career opportunity. The high school counselor is very unlikely to sit down with one of the students and say, well, I don't know, have you ever thought about being a tour guide or running expeditions, to the, I don't know. It's
no, and I think
kind of
travel,
common thread.
I think there was actually a little bit of a stigma of working in the travel industry as well back in this sort of when I joined in the mid-90s, especially in the UK. It was seen as, the travel industry. There's, and again, I've got ultimate respect for travel agents, but most people's perception of the travel industry is a travel agent and walking into a shop on the high street and saying, I want to book, a 2-week holiday to Spain, as cheap as I can. And I think that was the perception. I think travel was seen as I think there was a bit of a stigma to saying I work. Often if you said I work in travel, you would have to justify what I do. No, I'm not a travel agent. I don't just sell package holidays out of a brochure. I do this and I do that. And I think, but I think that's thankfully gone now.
Well, I think that's right, because who do people see? Especially things are changing a little bit now, but back then, who do people see that work in the travel? It's the travel agent. And again, there's nothing. I mean, I would rather be a travel agent than a stockbroker or
100%.
Any number of jobs. But and there's travel agents out there that travel a lot as well. But the perception maybe from people that aren't involved in the industry, you say travel, they see a travel agent sitting in a, it used to be a mall, shopping mall, or an office somewhere in front of a computer screen doing that all day. And they can't even, it's hard to imagine that people could be doing the type of things that, you and I have been doing over the years. And it's, it's kind of too bad.
And I had my friends in whenever I went back to the northeast, and I'd be away for 8 months or 9 months, and I'd go up there and I would see them. You'd walk in there and they'd almost say, all right, where have you been? Kind of thing. You need to explain to them. All right, really, that sounds like, you're missing. Then they'd say, oh, you missed a good weekend last weekend. It's like, well, you did what you do every weekend. But I think people could not get the concept of what it was. It's like, especially the tour leading. People just didn't get it. People didn't get it, and they say. And the other thing I would say as well, I mean, travel was also, it was very poorly paid in the mid-90s. I think a lot of people are in travel, especially in the UK. So it was, it wasn't the profession that people would necessarily want to go in, because it was, it for the most part was poorly paid. And then the other part with the adventure travel, we have to say that, there's a massive proportion of people, who travel, who have no idea or who had no idea at the time what adventure travel was, what cultural travel was, what small group travel was. They just didn't know. And thankfully, you can see now that Explore was the company that I've spent most of, my working career at. But you can see that companies like Explore, what they were doing, 30, 35, 40 years ago is is the way that people want to travel now. The dial has changed, so people are looking, thinking, yeah, that's how we should travel. We should travel in a way that benefits communities. When we travel, we want to do more, because again, when I was young, people basically travelled from England. I mean, the whole purpose was you went somewhere that was hot, but like England. So, people would want to eat English food, drink English beer, but it's hot. It's not going to rain. And again, I think now more people are much more willing to travel to places where, we want to experience the local culture, which has always been important to me.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, things have certainly changed. I mean, you and I are sitting here having a conversation on the Adventure Travel podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not tooting my podcast. I'm just, the conversation is out there and the people are interested in it. And we've got organization, Adventure Travel Trade Association. We've got all these organizations that it's kind of a big deal now. Fortunately, it is, because I honestly believe that type of experiential travel really does help, in the world in many ways. I mean, we've got challenges we need to be careful that we're not overdoing it in certain areas, that type of thing. But I think it's a pretty good thing. All right. So I do. You kind of touched on, some friends back home and stuff and attitudes around this type of work, but I'm curious specifically your family, your close, like even when you got on that truck to take off for months to, travel all over the place, did they just think you were total crazy? Were they supportive? What kind of support did you get from them?
They were very supportive, and actually my parents, I look back now and think of how supportive they were. What I did was so unusual from where I came from. It was such a mad thing. And, having left university and, potted around, not deciding what to do, I think, I look back now and think of how supportive they were and how encouraging they were. And it was I talk about it now as I went to sort of, I saw a truck and I decided I was going to go on it. It was a massive, massive step to make that step from me, from personally, there's a lot of barriers. There's a lot of reasons not to do it. And, I had the support of my parents to, if that's what you want to do, which, I probably didn't appreciate that much I didn't appreciate that as much at the time. I just thought they were pleased having,
well, and sometimes,
university. Yeah, I went to university, then I came home and I lived at home, and I just thought they were just pleased to get rid of me so you can go anywhere. So do it. But they were really supportive.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes, just if you think about if a parent grows up, maybe like your parents, like that's way outside the box. Doing what you did is way outside the box. They would never imagine that for themselves. They wouldn't imagine that for their children. So then when their child comes up and says, hey, this is what I'm going to do or what I want to do, sometimes just not saying no is supportive, because many parents would do that. Many parents would absolutely try and talk them out of it. You cannot go. What are you going to do? They're going to create all these fears. If you do this, you're never going to have a family because of whatever, all these fear-based things that they could share with their child to keep them from taking action. So sometimes I would imagine a lot of people, if they just don't say anything negative, like that might be hard. And they're not necessarily saying, oh my gosh, it's amazing, you should go do it. But if they're not saying this is a horrible idea, you're going to throw your life away, then, there's a lot of different levels of support. And as we get older and more mature and we understand what it's like to have children of our own, we realize, maybe they were a lot more supportive than I thought because they didn't just say no.
Yeah. And I think I agree with that. I think back in those days as well, it was a really big thing. It was a massive big thing that there was a lot of unknowns, contact, my contact with my parents was basically, post présence around the world. I would go and I'd get a letter from them, you'd hang on for that. That was it. The phone calls were expensive. There wasn't much, but also I'd never traveled. I mean, in Europe, it's very different to the States of traveling. Everybody travels overseas in Europe. Everybody, from England, it's easy to get anywhere. But I'd never been overseas with my parents. I'd never been on a foreign holiday with them. I'd actually been away when I went to university. I went on holiday with some friends, but it wasn't like I was a massively experienced traveller. I just had this real yearn, and I just want to do that. I really want to do that. There's some sort of really sort of interesting triggers, I think, when you look back at why I wanted to do it. And I can still remember, I can still remember as a kid at school, at junior school, having a visit from a chap from Canada. that came over and was going around the schools telling them about Canada, and he brought a kayak in, and it's like those stories. You actually called it, and I can still remember now. And I'm looking at 46 years ago, and Mr. Yakimo from Canada came over and spoke to us, and it was just like, wow, I was transfixed. And my granddad gave us a book that had something about the Himba in the tribes in Namibia, and just think, yeah. So I had this real yearning to travel, but I'm not. People would say, where does it come from? Because you didn't travel with your parents. Nobody really. But I think it's just something which is within you, isn't it? Something that whole discovery, and that for me, it was this real journey of discovery. They're not saying no, and I know, actually speaking, especially to my father later, they were worried sick. They were absolutely worried sick when I left home. Yeah, sort of beyond worry almost. But they never showed it.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because I've been traveling full time for the last 3 years and had traveled quite a bit in the business, but now I'm traveling full time for 3 years. But you know what? My mom, when I want to talk to my mom, we've got a regularly scheduled WhatsApp video call once a week. It's no big deal. So I'm sure that helps her deal with the fact that I'm, quite a ways away. I'm in Colombia right now. And so things have definitely changed there. And there was something else that you had kind of mentioned in there that got me thinking about different personality styles, because as we know, everybody there's a wide range of personality styles. There's whether you are a big follower of the Myers-Briggs personality assessment or not. They've come up. There's 16 different personality styles, and I'm pretty sure that if you took most of the folks like myself and you and other people I've interviewed on the show, or other people that I've worked with in the past, I think there's a pretty good chance we're all kind of sitting on one very distinct point of that, of those 16. We probably 80% of us probably share one of those 16, the same one of those 16. And it's that curiosity and just that desire to connect, and just what some people might call ADHD, or that inability to sit still and do the same thing over and over and over. I'm curious, have you had points in your life where you kind of felt like maybe if you didn't have that wanderlust and that, let's go back to this. We started the conversation with how great this has been for you. It's been life-changing, and you've created an amazing life for yourself. And I get that. And I also recognize with my personality, Wayne, maybe there's a similarity. There's some times that I've thought, life would be a lot easier if I could have just been that person to sit in one place and, work in a more traditional industry. Would that have made life easier for me in my relationships? Would that have just made my life a little easier, because I wasn't constantly thinking about where I wanted to go next and what I wanted to do? Did you ever have moments where you kind of wished you were normal?
I don't think I did.
I shouldn't say that that way.
Yeah, I don't think I did. And I think, I met my wife traveling, so we were traveling, so we met, and then when we were, first initial stage of our relationship, we traveled a lot together. When I worked in the UK, I never took a holiday. Again, we're lucky in England; we get more holidays, I think, than people get in the States and Canada. But we never. There wasn't one day that we did. I never took a holiday from work just to be off for the day. It was always, we're going to go somewhere. We did some mad things, like went to China for a long weekend because we could. Went to Sri Lanka for a long weekend. But I think, I never. And that's eased off since children came along. It's definitely eased off. But I have no regrets. There's no point. And sometimes I look at my peers of what people I went to university with and what they do, and they've got, some of them have had fantastic jobs, fantastic careers. When you say fantastic, you talk, sort of earn big money. But I look back and think I wouldn't change it. That for the life that I've sort of had in the travel industry, 100%, I wouldn't change it.
You said something really revealing there. For me anyway, when you said, I met my wife while I was traveling and we traveled together. I think that's, so maybe she's got a little bit that common interest or common set of values. And I think that if you're fortunate enough to have people in your life that you care about, that enjoy that about you, and they encourage you to go do that, then it's fine. If you're in relationships with people that don't understand your desire to go and are frustrated by your desire to go, and they don't want to go, so you get frustrated because you can't go and they don't want to go with you. I think those are probably the moments in my life when I was like, oh, I wish I was normal. Because then it'd just be so much easier.
I think I was.
But you're right. I don't wish I was normal. I just wish I would have. I just wish that the people in my life had similar interests. I guess that's the answer.
And I think that was.
There's a lesson there.
It leveled me as well. It was somebody who wants to travel, wants to go. So it was me being involved in travel, I was like, we go here, we'll do this, or we can put this, I'll put it together. And she was, yeah. It was, of course, wherever we go, yeah, we'll go. She was happy with, it
That
was
is so
funny.
cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was young, I knew I've had this bug my whole life, and I knew I had this bug, and I'd meet people, especially, if there was a romantic interest, the first thing I'd say is, hey, I'm going to go traveling. I'm going to be traveling the world. If you want to go with me, this is great, And they'd, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I'd fall in love and they didn't want to travel.
Yeah, I know.
So be careful. Anybody that's listening to this, that's very cool. And what about your kids? Are they interested?
Yeah, they love it. The oldest one is 14 now. The youngest one is 11. I didn't think having kids would change me at all. I said it's never going to change me, and it changed me massively, of course. From a person that was we were away as much as we could be, always overseas. With the kids, we sort of eased off a bit, and we actually, was something again I've really enjoyed. We discovered a lot of the UK. So for family holidays, it's easy to pack up the car. With what seems like the entire contents of your house, and drive to another empty house that you stay at for a week. And so we spent a bit of time with the kids where we travelled around a lot of Wales, found places that we would have never have found again if we hadn't had the kids and hadn't done that. We found some places that are magical that we go back to every year for a week every year as part of sort of the Grove family travel. But then we sort of hit COVID, which wasn't the greatest years for obviously to travel. But since then, we go away sort of every year on a probably a relatively big holiday, and the kids they just love it. I mean, they have the love of trying new things, new experiences, seeing things that are different. So we travel in a style of, we've never gone away as a family on a package holiday where we booked into a hotel and had a week at a beach. It's always been on an active holiday. It's always been doing things, and it's given them a love for the world, and not just a love for the world, but I think it gives you, I also say about me that traveling also gives you a real understanding, I think, of how the world works, and I think it can make you more compassionate. I think it can make you more, you can understand, you can you can sympathise with things more, and you also see, which I think I've been really, really lucky, that probably some of the most vilified places, perhaps in the press, and what we read about are some of the nicest places that you can go to, some of the nicest, best people you will ever meet, and that I think that's it's made me a much more leveled, measured person, being able to travel, and I want them to do the same.
It kind of challenges some of those thoughts and ideas that people can pick up in regular society. If you're in the States or UK and you never really go anywhere, you don't meet people, you believe kind of whatever you see on the news. And I notice, as I travel, I mentioned I'm in Colombia. I've spent a lot of time in Colombia. Anybody listening to the show very often knows I'm here a lot.
Yeah.
And that's a place that when I was growing up, there was nothing positive about Colombia on the news. And when I, even recently, 3 years ago, when I told my parents that, I was going to take off and go do the full-time traveling thing and I was going to start in Colombia, man.
Yeah.
They almost said no. I mean, there was a little bit more of that, like, not supportive side of, that's a horrible choice. Why would you go there? And immediately fell in love with the place. Yeah. And now, and now my dad's starting to warm up. He's like, well, maybe I'll come visit you down there. And it's, but you're right. It challenges your preconceived ideas. Or last summer, actually, when I started doing the podcast, I was in Southeast Asia and was spending some time in both Indonesia and Malaysia. And I'd never been to, a predominantly Muslim country.
Yeah.
And you can't grow up in the U.S. and not go to Muslim countries without developing some kind of, rhetoric or ideas of whatever it might be like. And it was just amazing. The people were so amazing. And that was just you'd had a lot more experience with that in the past, but it just opened my world. And really, it's a big part of why it's called Big World Made Small, because I was there when I came up with this idea. Yeah. And it was like, wow, my world just got so much smaller because of that experience. And I just think it's huge for kids to help them do that. So maybe you don't want to do this, maybe you don't want to play this game, but if you were to guess if any of your children would end up working in the adventure travel business or this type of business, could you see that happening? You want to make any predictions that when they're listening to this in a few years, they figure out if Dad was right or wrong?
Yeah, I think I could. I think I could probably see the oldest. He again, he's like a clone of me in many ways, and I think, for me, tour leading gave me confidence that perhaps I didn't have. It gives you a persona. I've watched him it's funny when we go on holiday, and he's quite shy. He's often on the edge of things. But when we go on holiday, he organises the other kids. We've done, we've travelled in family group holidays, and he's organising the kids. And you say, oh yeah, I think there's a little leader in the making here, a little tour leader. And he likes to show people things. So it's a good pathway into travel. I would actually love both of my kids to do a season of either tour leading or a ski season where they work in that sort in the hospitality, be it the hospitality industry, the tourism industry. I think it gives you. I think it teaches you a lot of skills that you wouldn't get anywhere else. When I did my tour leading, dealing with people, dealing with conflict, it was a very, very steep learning curve, but it was skills which I developed, which have been again invaluable in sort of working career.
I agree with you 100%. I think that if you can be a tour leader for one season, maybe more, but if you can do that for one season, you just hit the ground running when you show up in any situation where you're dealing with people, because anybody that's never been a tour leader or never been on a tour might not know this, but when you're with groups like that, things come up, and you're managing so many different personalities and getting people to feel included, and when maybe they're obnoxious, but you've got to figure out ways to work through these things, I think. And public speaking. I remember one of the gentlemen I interviewed on here he'd said he was kind of the more reserved type. I think I know it was, but I don't want to mention my name in case I'm wrong. I don't want to be wrong, but he was kind of reserved, quiet type, ended up going along in some sort of support role on, I think, an overland type trip in Africa. And at some point they're like, okay, it's your turn to give the briefing. I don't know if it was through the day, a new group. I don't remember what it was, but he was terrified, and he got it all figured out. And then he did it in front of the group. And that was the moment when he realized he was going to work in the tourism industry the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. Was that one, that guide briefing for the clients or whatever. And it was like, and because he'd never felt so confident, he just did it, and they were excited to hear it. And he's like, oh, this feels amazing. So it's a bit like, it can open up a lot of things for people.
It's a bit like you have an alter ego, a different personality that, because I'd probably say that I was quite quiet and reserved. And, somebody actually said to me before I started tour leading, I met another tour leader just by chance, sort of in my hometown. He said, when I'm here, he said, I'm just a normal, plain, simple sort of chap. He said, when you tour lead, he said, you just change it, and everybody, most people want to have a good holiday, so that's a good start. But people listen to you, and you find yourself, I'm thinking, I went to Leicester University, did an audit degree in biology and law. And then I did 2 years where I didn't do an awful lot of jobs, and I travelled. But I'm stood here now, and I'm telling people that perhaps somebody who's perhaps a chief executive of a multi-million-pound company, what we're going to do for the day, and it's this. And then at night you sat around the table, and there was times when, with the groups, you sat around and you realise that whole social sphere that's there, but you're talking to somebody who's perhaps, I remember one of the most eminent surgeons in a category in the country that people know because of what he's done. And the other end of the table, there's somebody who was a bricklayer, from a completely different social background. And I used to love that about the tour leading, of one bringing them all together, but actually leading these people, and also knowing that you had the trust. It's a big thing to know that you have to earn the trust and respect of the group. But it was such a good feeling, to be leading a group where you led them. They all gelled. They all had a brilliant time. It was, as I said at the beginning, I think it's the best job I've ever done. It's also the hardest when it goes wrong at times, but it really, really is the best job.
I think I heard you say it, and I heard you say it. I don't know if you said it, but I heard it in my head because it resonated. I remember when I was leading trips, and even just day trips, whether I was a fishing guide in Montana for a while, or I was, managing a lodge, we'd get done with the week and we'd send the guests home, or if I was leading a departure somewhere. Interestingly enough, I would say I enjoyed all of it. Well, not all of it. I'm human.
Most of it.
But for some reason, that when I would get that hormonal dopamine, I don't know what it was, but that, or maybe it's oxytocin or whatever, was actually at the end of the tour when it's like, okay, when I say goodbye to them at the airport, we give the hugs and they get on their planes and I go to my gate to wait for my flight. For some reason is when I always got the rush. Did you experience that?
Yeah, I did. And I'd get yeah, the end of a trip where you know it's gone really well. It was when I led tours. It was you wouldn't be at the end of the trip. You get another group. So often you would be your next group would have arrived before your last one's left, because the plane comes in, it drops off a group of people, and then you see the other people through. Bye bye, they all go. So you would have this
you got to get your
real rush, but you get this real rush of, this has been amazing, it's been brilliant, I've loved it. Wow, we've achieved so much. And I think we used to collect in paper questionnaires. So if you had a little sneak of your paper questionnaires, and you'd done very well in that, this is amazing. And then you think, right, we've got through that, right. It's starting again with a bunch of people, and again, that was it was two highs, really. It was two real highs.
Yeah, I remember, I think early on when I first become aware of how good I felt at the end of a trip, I questioned myself. I'm like, what's wrong? Why do I feel so good when it's over? Is that because I didn't enjoy it and I'm happy it's over? Because that's normally when you go to a job and you're finished with the job and you feel like, oh, thank goodness it's over. It is a thank goodness it's over. But with me, with the tourism, it was always like, thank goodness it went well. Thank goodness they're happy. Thank goodness that they're going to go home and they're going to remember this stuff. They're going to remember these things that I was part of being involved in. And as soon as I realized that that's what it was about, it was a lot better.
Yeah. And I think again,
or reading reviews, I used to, there was a period in my life where I wasn't able to go do some of the stuff I wanted to do, but I'd had a balloon ride business a few years earlier, and I had a lot of great reviews on the balloon ride business and TripAdvisor. And whenever I was feeling kind of down and bored and feeling like I couldn't go do what I want to do, I'd sometimes pull up TripAdvisor and sit there and read through my reviews, and it would just come right back to me.
And I think again, you never lose that sort of that. I mean, it's like a drug. What the tour leader brings you, that sort of And sometimes again, to take us back a step or forward a step, people arriving at the airport. The other thing which I really I grew to really enjoy. And I would say at Explore, there was some fantastic leader training before I did it. We went through, it was, leaders go through, at that stage, went through an awful lot before, real intense training beforehand. And, one of the things, we were told was never judge a book by the cover, never judge people on the first appearances. And again, where I see you take this into later life, but I learned so many times on day one, somebody that could be irritating, rude, sort of emotional. Sometimes when in the old days when I used to fly to India, they went via the Gulf states, 3 different aircraft, get to South India, they're tired, the luggage isn't there, and it's the time difference, and you'd learn that actually how they behave on day one. It's my job as a leader, I've got to draw them in. And the other side was the people that were often really, really quiet. And again, I think what you said about that hit at the end of the trip, there's people on the trip that are really quiet and perhaps a little bit withdrawn, and bringing them in to be part of the group and watching them develop. And again, the phrase it's used a few times of life changing, you think at times, and it was, it's a really good part to feel as though that you've potentially changed people's lives. Because I would say for tour leading, and again, it was a question I used to ask many leaders when I did the interview, and what do you want a tour leader for? And anyone that said travel, and you would say, anything else? And no, I just want to travel. You're not getting the job, because I think you do it for sort of almost, the old fashioned, it's customer service. It's about, leading people in the customer service, and the travel is the environment that you do it in, and it's the big plus. But anyone that just went into tour lead to travel would be a disaster.
I think after several years, at one point I had some opportunities to kind of reflect on, figure out, okay, well, what are my personal values, and probably in a coaching program, and I came to this conclusion that I should have figured out a lot sooner that my highest value is shared experiences.
Yeah,
and that could look like a lot of different things, but shared experiences, and that's what leading a group, doing any of this type of travel, it could be shared experience, even if I go with a friend and we just travel together, or if I'm leading a group. But that's why I enjoyed being a fly fishing guide.
Yeah.
It wasn't the fly fishing. It was not I like to fly fish. I'm a very good fly fisherman, but it was like, I was always happier watching someone else catch a fish than if I had caught the fish, and just that think, holy cow, how lucky am I that I get to be here when this person is so excited about a place that I brought them. The same thing, and I had a hot air balloon ride business. I used to have a lot of couples get engaged on the balloon. I'd take two people up and he'd go 5,000-10,000 feet in the air, and he'd pull out a ring and slide it on her finger. I'm like, wow, how cool is this that I get to be a part of this? And I think that's an important thing for anybody that wants to be a tour leader, a guide. If they don't enjoy if that doesn't mean anything to them, I just can't imagine why they could be, or how they could either be successful or happy doing it.
I think it could be the worst job in the world. I think if you haven't got that element in you, you just do it for the travel. It's the downsides of tour leading can be very lonely. You're away from home an awful long time. You live out of a bag, and not to have that love and desire of shared experiences, want to be with people. And also show people things that they would never see by themselves, that they would never have experiences, and I go back and I used to bore everybody senseless in the office about some of the stories you would say, but I led for a long time in Egypt. I was in Egypt for a long time, and there was things that when you were there, and people would remember some of the experiences that we had in Egypt rather than the pyramids. And I'd say, if you ask people what's your highlight in Egypt, we used to do something where I went to Luxor Bazaar with them, and the Luxor Bazaar, you sort of turn right, and it's the real touristy part of the bazaar, which was probably not my favourite place in the world. But you turn left, and you walk up there, and say, people go, "What are we going up here for?" There's there's plastic buckets and wire wool, and and cloth, and soap, and then they said, "This is the local bazaar." But used to always, and I used to do this every 2 weeks when I did this. I'd stop at a place, and it was selling sugarcane drinks, and you would have 18 people or 24, I think the groups were there, and they said, "Does anybody ever tried sugarcane?" And no. And it was the old washing machine mangles what they had. So they had a long length of sugarcane. You put the sugarcane in the mangle, turn it round, and the juice would come out. And I'd get one glass of sugarcane drink, and then you had straws, thankfully, and then people would, no, we don't want to do that. And then it would just say to one person, "Somebody's going to try. Come on, I bought this for you, lot." And someone would try it. Oh, yeah. And then somebody else, and then you're waiting 24 sugar canes, please, as everybody does it, and it's just them pushing their own personal boundaries as well. But at the end of the trip, we were on the trip, so it was that. And it's not about the drink per se, but it's about pushing boundaries and doing something that they would never have done, taking them out of the comfort zone. But after about 5 or 6 days in Egypt, traveling around, it was hot. I worked my first season in Egypt. I worked there through the summer, and it was hot. And sugarcane was an amazing way to sort of refresh yourself. But you come across people be saying, "Oh, I'll have a sugarcane drink, please." We're not tourists. We're like the local. No, you are tourists, but they wanted to be different. They wanted to be seen to be different because we're having the locals drink. And it's a very small thing, but it's always lived with me, that of how you can get 24 people. If you'd said to them before, "You're going to drink in this place, you're going to have it, and you're going to like it," they don't. No, we're not going to do that. And it's that they had to want to do it eventually, but you encourage them, you facilitate it, you make it, and then a little bit of peer pressure perhaps as one does it, but they all do it, and then they all think, yeah. And some people probably don't like it, but some people at least have done it.
Do you think that, I don't know how you would measure it. You probably have measured this because you know this stuff is when you've got these group departures, the person that signs up for a group departure, how does the importance of meeting other travelers and connecting with other travelers, is that super important? Or are they doing it more because the dates work and the price works? I mean, how important is I'm going to be with a group of like-minded people, make some friends, and experience things together? Is that important?
I think it's massive. I think it's really big. I think it's been in the sort of the group travel market. The one thing that the internet or artificial intelligence can't provide is a group. It's a group isn't going to appear there. And I think it's more the outliers, the individuals, and occasionally it depends where the trip is. There's perhaps some places where I've led trips before where the only way you can really do it is on a group trip. So you might get one or two people. Yeah, we wanted to come here, and this is the only way we can do it. But I would say 95% of people, it's a big part of what they do, and it's again, it's what you said. It's shared experiences. It's meeting people from walks of life who you would never, normally meet in your social circle, and just having fun. Having a good time. I think sometimes travel can be seen as quite cerebral. It's culture, it's cerebral. We do this, we do that, but ultimately, it's everybody at night, perhaps around a campfire somewhere, having a drink and just laughing and just having fun. I also think there's sometimes a bit of a stigma about group travel. Sometimes people can look at it and think, we'd much rather do it independently. It's better than group travel. I know there's companies that can organise trips for you, but I would say with a leader, you will see and do things like you would not be able to do if you just did it yourself. You get access and gateways to things which are, be it a local restaurant that's just opened up, that's magical. A homestay, you can't do that yourself.
I agree completely. And you give kind of two ends of the spectrum there. One is kind of the independent travel. The other is the group with a leader. And then, of course, we have, the guided private. So maybe you've got a couple and they've got a guide that hangs out with them for a week or two or whatever, traveling around. So I think a lot of companies might make the argument, obviously with a leader or guide or somebody that's got access and knows things, you can see other things. But when you go between a private guided and a group guided, and I'm not even sure I'm using the same terminology you guys would use, but that's where you've got the other travelers that you were talking about that you don't know, that come from a variety of backgrounds. And it's almost, I don't know if this, I guess what comes up for me is like, if you've got 10 people in a group, you've got 10 interpretations of the same experience. And if you can share that and connect on that level, it almost like it multiplies your experience. I guess is where I'm trying to go with this. So I've got my experience. Like I know what I experienced on this safari, but I'm looking at Mary here, who is from Michigan and is an accountant in Michigan. And I'm watching her experience of the same safari. And I'm noticing, and I'm kind of picking up some of her experience. And then Bob and Bill and all these people around me, I'm picking up a little bit of their experience. So now I've like taken my experience and maybe 3, 4, 5x'd it. I don't know. What do you think? Does that sound? It's a good theory,
safari,
right?
I think safari is a really good example. And I was on safari last year. We took the kids on a group tour safari. One of the girls on the trip was obsessed with giraffe. Just wanted to see a giraffe. And that first time she saw a giraffe, and then I'm giraffe, I can take or leave them. I like them, but they're not my favorite animal necessarily. But you find yourself looking for giraffe for Zoe, and and that kind of thing. And I think, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that whole experience and seeing what other people get, it's all part of the group experience, and that brings you around to the end of the day where you sat around the fire or sat around the table or in the bar or in the restaurant and you're talking, and it's an experience. If you haven't done it, I'd say if you haven't done a group holiday, you almost in many ways don't know what you're missing, because it's something which is quite hard to articulate what that is, of as I say, 16 people coming together that didn't necessarily know each other and just having shared experiences, different interpretations, and it's magical.
And along those same lines, I'm thinking, because I've guided just private individual, private couples, and I've guided, I've led big group trips. And what I notice when you've got a small, let's just say it's a couple, they kind of make pretty clear early on what they're into. So safari, back to safari as an example, we're into lions or big animals. We really are just interested in big animals. We want to see the big five, whatever. And most guides would just say, okay, I'm going to take you. We're going to go look for the big five. When you've got a group with a variety of interests, and maybe there's a couple there that, I'm really into botany, or I'm really into the bugs, or I'm into this, or I'm into that. And if you've got a good guide, a good trip leader, they're able to incorporate that kind of for everybody. So everybody kind of gets a little bit of what they want. But then what happens is the couple that thought they were only into big lions or big animals, now all of a sudden are intrigued by, I don't know, the culture, the culture or the insects or the spiders or whatever. And it just kind of opens the world, doesn't it? So there's a lot of reasons. I'm happy this conversation came up. That's cool.
And I also, as a person, I would travel independently. I've traveled with a private guide before. I think in many ways travel is, I think it's a bit of, we say in the UK, it's horses for courses. You choose at that moment in time what's the right thing and the best thing for you. And I say, as a family, we've traveled independently, but we've also traveled as a group. And we'll continue. I think it's the mix and match of everything, isn't it? That I think sometimes you get people that just want to do group trips and we just want to do, and it can be, if you've got other people that one day they'll do a group trip, one day they'll perhaps do private guide, they'll then fly themselves independently. And I think it's choosing the destination. And I would probably take my kids to India, and I've spent a lot of time in India, and we'd probably go as a family and travel around, get a driver private and travel around a bit, so you want to show them again. So I think we, again, for the group holiday, it goes back to your earlier question of what percentage of people are all sort of on the holiday that that really want to do the group holiday. And I think actually, I've just thought this as we've gone through this, but the reason we book the group holiday is as much for the group experience as the destination, because we actually like that and the kids like it. And it's and the group holidays, especially when done with the kids, everyone's been of the same ilk. We've talked about, actually, we've just been talking. We met a family in South Africa on the next explore trip. They came to Thailand with us this year, and we just talked about where we're going to go next year. And the general message is also, we don't care where we go, let's just get a group together and we'll just go somewhere. So yeah, it's the experience, the group experience,
and it's different enough. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, and you might have somebody that only does group trips that may benefit. I would invite them to consider maybe trying to do an independent travel. Because it's all different. You can learn a lot doing independent travel as well. It can be a big confidence builder, or private guided or whatever. So I think that.
And I think the right group trip, again, going back to my leading days, one of the real buzzes I also got was sort of sometimes just giving people a free evening and seeing where, and encouraging them, this is what I'd recommend, but go and do your own thing, and actually saying to them, look, guys, I would eat out with the group every night. I used to love it, and most nights I'll do it, but some nights you've got a free afternoon where you can do your own thing, get together and go and find and do some exploration. And I think, again, on a good group trip, that's it was sort of my role to give people the confidence to be able to eat in, perhaps a shack type restaurant in India. But then, you have the next night, you say, right, guys, you go out and you do the same. And again, they would come back and, invariably, it was something which was really special to them, because we went out, we all went as a group, we found a restaurant, it was better than yours, it wasn't quite as good as yours, but we loved this and we did that, and somebody came and spoke to us, and someone offered us a lift home, and it's about, and sometimes I think from a group point, it is also, perhaps if you're not a confident traveller, it's a good way to get you into travelling, but actually you can build your confidence on the trip, and then might decide at the end of it, I can do this myself, I'm going to do this. It's
Yeah, that's great, because then they're getting, as opposed to, because I could see some tour operators or some guides are like, I got to take care of them every minute from the time that I see them until they get on the plane and leave. And I'm going to control everything. But what you just described is that's more valuable to the traveler, because frankly, if you send a group of guests, if you give a group of guests some time to go explore on their own, and to create some connections without you, it actually adds a lot of value, because there's adrenaline. They're like, when they're with the guide, they're like, okay, I don't have to worry about anything. But now the guide's not here. Now we got to figure out how to get to the restaurant, or how to order the food, or how to do this or how to do that, which creates that, you step outside the comfort zone a little bit. When anytime growth is what happens on the other side of comfort, right? And you get that dopamine or that adrenaline, and then you come back and you're like, wow, wasn't that cool? Like you were just describing. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, so, do you know what? Somebody was one night, because again, group travel, it can also be claustrophobic. You spend a lot of time together, and if that one night, I always say, if somebody wants to go to McDonald's and get a burger by themselves, and then do it. It's your holiday, it's your travel,
which might be an adventure too.
Yeah,
right. For some people, maybe they want to go to McDonald's in Kathmandu. Well, I probably don't have one there, but
when I was in Thailand this summer with the kids, and we had a couple of McDonald's stops. Just it worked well at the time. As I can't eat any more pad Thai. I just can I have a McDonald's, and actually you come out of the McDonald's and say, God, it's really different from the English McDonald's, isn't it? And it was amazing. Yeah, and you talk about that, and actually the little things that you talk about. Well, McDonald's in Thailand is actually quite expensive. Relatively, so you talk about the different kinds of people who would go there and why they wouldn't, and actually it's probably a bit more expensive than McDonald's in England, and you'd be talking. So again, everything is about learning as well, isn't it? And taking that. But I think again, I wasn't naively. I think it's good for people to have a little bit of time as well. Even if you want to have a sandwich in your hotel room, then it's your holiday. That's what you should do one night.
Yeah. So I just had a moment of, I guess, empathy for my son. He's been traveling with me the last few summers.
Yeah.
And we were over in Malaysia and Thailand, and he's like, I just want McDonald's. I just want McDonald's. No, you can't have McDonald's.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're on Penang Island in Malaysia, some of the best food in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to go to McDonald's, and I just refuse. I was not going to take him to McDonald's. So I'm imagining him as kind of like a client on a group trip, and I'm the guide, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I don't care if you want to do that. We're not going to do that. And he was so upset. And I was like, I'm not taking him to McDonald's. And he says, well, I'm not going to go then. I'm like, okay, fine. And I left him in the room, and I went to McDonald's.
Yeah.
Because I was stressed out and I just wanted the comfort food of McDonald's. Just me thinking, I'm in charge. I'm your father, but anyway, so.
I was about, but I say it's the way of the world now, isn't it? And sometimes if it's what the one thing as well, that's what you want. That's what you can have. I'm certainly not doing it every night. We're not doing it every day, but every now and then, and then I can tell everybody.
That's good parenting advice.
Yeah. Well, I'm not so sure about that, but I'm not so sure, but it's again sometimes. Yeah, we have one of our kids is one will eat anything, and the other one is a bit more choosy what he eats. So every now and then you think, at least I know he's eating something.
Yeah, that's true. Well, unfortunately, with my kid though, it flips and flops because ordinarily, if we go to a nicer restaurant, he wants to order the most expensive thing. He wants the oysters. He wants the stuff that usually the waitresses will look at him and say, "Are you sure?" And then we're in Penang.
Yeah,
he wants McDonald's.
That's wrong.
Could have killed him.
I think you were right in that circumstance.
Anyway,
I'll just tell you a little something about my youngest when we went away. And he's not particularly great at eating. He wasn't, and he was 5 when we went on our first sort of overseas trip, and we delayed a little bit because we know he's a nightmare to eat overseas. And we went to Turkey, and we got to Turkey, and I think there was a buffet there, and I came out with he eats bread. We know he eats bread, and I came out with a basket of bread and said, "Oh, there's some bread." And he looked at it, and he's like looking at it. I said, "You're really going to like Turkish bread?" And he just looked at me and went, he had like a taste of, I don't like Turkish bread. So I said, right, I'll go and get you. So I picked up the bread basket. I walked back in the buffet, round the table, came out with the same bread basket and said, "He's giving you some English bread just for you." And he's like, "This is good. This is good." So every day, I had to go for 2 weeks. I had to go and get his breakfast because he would look and he'd say, I can only see Turkish bread. No, I'll get you it. I'll ask the man, he'll bring you some English bread.
You know what? You sound like a good tour leader because I could see you doing that with clients too.
100%,
I think you've learned these skills.
100%.
That sounds exactly like, people ask for things. I remember we'd have clients come to the place in Belize, and we had one guy that just really wanted guacamole.
Yeah.
And there's like, Belize is not like Mexico. We don't have, avocados everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't remember how we resolved it, but we managed to convince him that we had something much better.
It's amazing what you can do, isn't it? It's amazing what you can do.
I know I cannot get him guacamole, so I'm going to figure out how to make him even happier that we've got something better.
And again, but that is again, it's the power of tour leading, isn't it? That position that you've got, and people, it's almost a very privileged role to be in as well, because what you can, not what you can persuade people to do, but people will, it's people listen to you and people believe you and people, sort of accept you for what you say, which is brilliant.
Because I guess the psychology behind it is on some level, they are very dependent on you because they're in a place that they don't know. Maybe they feel some level of dependence on you that almost it creates a situation where they kind of have to trust you. Because if they don't trust you, then that creates a cognitive dissonance where it's like parents and children, right? Children sometimes will go along with things that their parents do, even when it's bad, because it's interesting, the whole psychology. I'm sure you are aware of all that. Simon, we've discussed a lot of things. We did not, I'm not sure we got where you wanted to go about some of the things you want to discuss. So I'm curious, what did I forget to ask you? What should I have asked you? Or what would you like to touch on either about yourself, kind of what you're doing with your current role, helping other tour operators? Love to hear a little bit about that and anything else that you'd like to touch on before we wrap it up.
No, I think I could talk all night. I really, really enjoyed it. Is the first thing to say. It's been a real pleasure to be on. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, thanks. And for myself, and I think probably what it's also self-reflective when you do things like this, and you look back, and you've sort of made me look back at what you went into travel for, and your support from your parents, and what happened here, and it is very self-reflective. And I would say that I've you look back on what has been so far an incredible career in an incredible industry, something that I've really enjoyed. You look back with very few, if any, regrets on it, and I would be happy if my children went into travel and had sort of the life that I've had leading traveling, and the pleasure that it's given me. And I think from my perspective now, I've never I've never really changed, but what I'd say, whatever role, I've eventually was product director at Explore, but what I've always passionately believed in is ultimately back to those tour leading days that, you just want to give people the best experience you possibly can. And that best experience is introducing them to a country, breaking down barriers, understanding people better. And again, that's the function of what I do now. So I've got my own sort of business where I talk to sort of the overseas partners that want to really work and bring people to their countries, and I help them break down the barriers as to not necessarily break down the barriers just to get people there, but to really talk to them about this is what you've got to do when you've got people there, this is what people want. And I think so often there is a bit of slight disconnect between what people perceive is wanted and what is actually wanted. So I help them break down those barriers so that when they do sort of get the business, and a lot of the travel business now is that there's a lot of legislation, there's a lot of boxes to be gone through, to be ticked, to make sure it's right. So help them with that. But ultimately, that ultimate goal of when you get people there, I just want to have the most amazing holiday that they could ever have. Again, you want it to be like a life. It can't be life changing every time, but you want it to be something that they will always remember the holiday that they've had for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And you're right. Maybe not every travel experience is life changing, but a travel experience is an amazing place to create an opportunity for a life changing experience.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
If you just look at, the opportunity more than any other place, it's hard to create a life changing experience at a restaurant or a grocery store or a dentist's office or many places. But on a trip to another country, you've got probably a better opportunity than most. So that's important.
And I also think, something I really like to stress, and I talk about it, and sort of life changing as it's sort of a bit of hyperbole as well, which is always good. But it's also, I think it's a real privilege to travel. And, I'm lucky in many ways that I traveled when I did. I was in, Central Asia in the mid-90s, to North Korea, went places, I'm lucky, and I think the world is changing, but it is a real privilege to travel as well. And I think, there's a lot of people in the world that, we talked about some of the vilified countries, that you would look in the press now and think, people don't get the chance to travel. There is no way they could experience what we can experience. And I think, it's, I'm always very conscious of that wherever I go. I want my kids and the customers, wherever. It's a real privilege to be able to do that, and it's something that's always been a responsibility that I've taken very seriously.
That you said a privilege and a responsibility, because you're right. Even as a tourist or somebody like myself traveling around Colombia, there's a responsibility, because I realize most of the people I meet could not pick up and go to the U.S. And you get to be you get to kind of just acknowledge that and be respectful and not, oh, well, I've been here, I've been there, aren't I great? And, that's, you're not going to create connections like that. So wise point. Simon, thank you very much. This was a fascinating conversation. I learned a lot and I just really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for sharing your time with myself and our listeners. And we're going to have some notes there under the show to help people figure out how to connect with you if they want to work on any projects with you or anything at all. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.